Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest needs no introduction, Marc Z of Marc Z Legal. Welcome, as always, to Radio Entrepreneurs.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Great to work with you. A much better upgrade on our traditional host.
Hopefully, we'll cut that piece out. We don't want him to hear that. You know what?
We love Jeff, and we love Jeff.
He hears it from you and I all the time.
That's right. We love Jeff, and hopefully he's enjoying his break. But fun to be here with you.
Always a pleasure to be here with you. So you always have some timely, topical, interesting stuff as we're getting to the end of the year here. What's on your mind?
Well, I thought we'd talk about the candidate applicant resume for as employers look at candidates and think about 2024 and ahead. And if you're a candidate or an applicant on a position, just giving you a little input of what we're seeing and what employers' thoughts are for the new year ahead. And
it's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know if you're talking about structure of a resume, what to include, what not to include, those types of things. But it's fascinating. As you were mentioning it, my thought process was, other than an electronic delivery, what really has changed on a resume in the last, generation? Besides calling it a CV, perhaps. But, it really seems to me that where technology has accelerated change so dramatically, obviously there's additional tools in the hunt, the search, whether using social media or other tools, but the basic framework and format of a resume has changed very little over the years, from what I can tell. But I'll defer to you in terms of telling us what the best practices are and what you're seeing and things of that nature. But it's an interesting observation. Am I incorrect in that assumption?
Well, a lot of what you're saying is correct. I think the difference now that's been a challenge for employers which you implied, is with emailing resumes now. It used to be, it's so easy, the process. So what happened is candidates or applicants, what they'll use a gun approach, just shoot in a lot of cases instead of being strategic. And with employers, it's a challenge because they're missing some good candidates because they're so overwhelmed a lot of times with the influx of resumes. Even in a tight market that we're in, there's a lot of candidates that are unqualified that are applying for positions. So
I will tell you, invariably, whenever I've posted for a position or looked for somebody, invariably, 10, 15, 20% is no relevant experience and probably not even applying to the job. It's more of a automated, response rate, to something. So,
right. So it used to be when you mailed resumes or dropped them off or had a more strategic approach, because you're mailing it. You had to get it copied. You had to have the paper right. So with that in mind, with a lot of employers, you were thinking strategically, and as an applicant, as a candidate, and employers invariably would be seeing less resumes, but more quality resumes, because candidates are not going to make that investment. Now, when you're emailing, you're as we said, you're using that gun approach. So for the candidate, what we're saying is you really want to be more strategic in your resumes. When you're applying for positions, you may want to have a base resume. Now, a lot of the resumes today are highlighting the skill set that they have, more so because of technology, and there's soft skills and hard skills, which is really helpful for the job. And then what they also want to do, though, is highlight their experience for the particular job. So today, with a computer, you can make changes on a resume. So again, invest in the time. If you have a position calling for a certain definite set of skill sets, make sure your resume highlights those skill sets. Don't bury them in the resume. Really sort of answer. It's like answering an email or a letter with what needs to be a definite in the position. In other words,
so really tailor towards the specifics that the position may be requiring, and make it excellent.
Correct. Now, so that an employer, when they see your resume, will not only take notice, but they'll also have a chance to really evaluate you, and you'll stand out. As opposed to if you're burying information or sending one resume and you're burying it, and employers are either using means on the computer to come up with those particular skill sets and experience, whether it's done by a computer generated, like artificial intelligence, or you have somebody looking over the resume and you're saying to the person, here are the key words. And if it gets buried, that's not going to be helpful to the candidate or the employer, because the employer will lose out in meeting you potentially and losing out in key candidates because they have so many resumes that are not qualified. And you who are qualified are going to lose out because your skill set and experience is not standing up.
I was smiling before, Mark, because I've got a trip down nostalgia lane that came up to my mind that you'll probably remember: double parking on Boylston Street to run into Copy Cop to get your box of resumes.
Right.
Who didn't do that at one point? What a couple of things that come to mind in today's sort of environment, maybe a little bit different through the generation, is the amount of movement. People have a tendency today, and you see a lot of resumes, a lot more than I do. But there's people that have a lot of transitions in their careers, either organizationally or sector. What is a common practice or a best practice today? Is there a longevity period? So if you're a person with 20 years of relevant experience, but it's broken up into 9 different organizations, is there a best practice for how far back I go, or how I represent that I've been in 9 companies in 25 years? I mean, doing the math, it doesn't sound like a lot, but on a piece of paper, it does look like a lot, and it looks like you don't have stability.
Well, first of all, use relevant background. We find some people have the kitchen sink in their resume. A resume is an overview of your background. If you were at a company for 15, 20 years, obviously you're going to put that company in, and depending on what comes back, I would just say 20 years and under, that's the best traditional way, because it has the most updated skills and experience you have.
Okay.
I think that the problem is if you get more than that, it's not necessarily extra experience that's going to help. And unfortunately, a lot of the positions are not demanding the extra experience. So if you have, say, 20 years of very relevant experience, that's fine. If you have less than that, say you had a career change and now you have 13 years versus 20 years of experience, a job might only be calling for 5 to 8. So I would put in the relevant experience, but any experience over 20 years, unless it's really, really significant, that's not necessarily important to employers unless it really stands out as either part of what what you were doing is part of the overall company, that you were there for 25 years. So you want to include that. But other than that, it's got to be something that really stands out.
So keep it tailored. One other question in that vein is, what happens in the event of, and I'll just create a scenario. One of the telltale signs people used to say in looking at a resume is consistency, that things tie together, and usually from a time perspective. I don't want to see looking at a resume, and let's just say they have 1997 to 2007, then there's a gap from 27 to 2010 because they were off trekking in Nepal, or had experience that was completely irrelevant to the position that they're applying to today. So would somebody highlight that in a cover letter to be able to bridge that gap? Because prospective employers are looking and saying, hey, how come there's nothing from 2007 to 2010 on this resume? Historically, recruiters used to say, no, you can't have a gap because that denotes that well, maybe you were, incapacitated or whatever the issue was. So how do people get over that? Because I would think more and more people today probably do have either blocks of things that are irrelevant looking back longitudinally over their career, or gaps for one reason or another.
So one way of dealing with it is what we discuss with a lot of candidates: related experience and other experience. So it may be related experience in terms of to the particular job or the particular industry that they've developed with. And then other experience would be experience maybe during that time to account for that period of time where they had a career break, or where they worked in a different space. So that's one way of handling it. The other way of handling
So you wouldn't typically suggest that in that scenario that something is set up chronologically, that it's really around experiences?
No, well, two things. One is what I just said, professional related experience and other experience. The other one is do it chronologically, as you're saying, but explain it. In other words, at the end of the responsibilities, put reason for leaving.
Gotcha.
And then you can put career break, traveling, or something like that and then they would explain it.
One other interesting thing, and it's been a recent debate amongst one of my kids, address or no address. We've gone, I think, full circle on that, and given that geography used to matter and didn't seem to matter while everyone was working remotely, is it coming back to being relevant to employers? I guess obviously if they're looking for somebody to be in the office full time. So would you suggest a resume include an address, or it doesn't include an address today?
I say if you're local and you're it's a local position, then put your address down. If you're not local, but you're interested in that position, and it's a remote position, and it's a position that you can or work hybrid in that role by commuting during the times the employer would allow, then what I would do is I would put your email address and your phone number. And then when you talk to the employer, then if they have a question about being local and where you are, absolutely, then you disclose that. But what happens is, for employers, they want to know if it's a local job, they want to know if somebody's local. But if it's a job that could be hybrid or a job that can be remote, location doesn't matter. And so it's good to take that out of the equation and just focus on your contact information.
Yeah, your response is completely consistent with how you open the segment, which is tailor it to the specific role that you're applying to.
Correct. I couldn't have said it better.
Excellent, Mark. I know we could probably, you and I, we can go on. We can have a whole week-long podcast on every one of these topics. But wonderful advice, good guidance as always. Mark, if people want to reach out to you, want to talk to you about perhaps their own situations or opportunities, what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Well, first of all, John, go on to our wonderful Radio Entrepreneurs website, radioentrepreneurs.com. Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C and the letter Z, marczlegal.com, MARCZLEGAL.com, or 617-338-1300.
Excellent. This has been a Marc Z moment on Radio Entrepreneurs. Always a pleasure. Always great to get your insights. And Marc, you're always timely and topical.
Thank you, John.
And we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.